Robert says only voters of the town of Sandgate can speak. I knew that wasn't going to go over well.
Power and authority are my middle name. And if I can lord it over 120 people, it's much better than lording it over any member of my family.
I really enjoyed the task and the position, and which I think surprises some people. A lot of people come and say, you know, why are you doing this? I can't imagine doing this.
You can't very well hold a town meeting where you're doing the town's business if it's going to be WrestleMania 10.
It's still important to them, and it's important to the process too, for people to get together and talk to each other.
The first couple of years, I probably knew 95% of the people personally. This past year, if I knew half.
And so he keeps on continuing, being more adamant. What he doesn't know, and the rest of the room knows, is that Harold Beatty was sitting next to me.
Turned to the camera and I said, for those of you who are at home, get out here to the municipal meeting and be a part of democracy in action.
Article 1, the first order of business is to elect a moderator and a recording clerk for the meeting. Is there a motion from the Assembly to nominate myself as moderator and Robin Wilcox as the recording clerk? Mr. Keelan? And second? Keith?
My first time was in 2001. My father was struggling with some health issues, and he'd been elected as the moderator and could not serve, could not run the meeting, and so I was kind of drafted into it. They made motions from the floor and nominated me to do it at that point.
So
and
you
I've been running
showed
it ever
up.
since.
So you showed up knowing your father was in ill health and couldn't do it. Were you expecting to be nominated that day?
Yeah, it was sort of planned. Yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't a complete surprise.
Okay.
So I had a chance to prepare.
A little bit of time to prepare.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. And you told me that your grandfather was town moderator also, so you're a third generation town moderator.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
It's been, I mean, I sort of feel like there's a bit of, I enjoy it very much for that reason. There's sort of a legacy, and I don't know, it wasn't anything I sort of felt predestined to do, but I'm glad it worked out the way it did. It's actually nice to kind of participate that way with the town government.
I was looking at the Secretary of State handbook for town moderator, and they described it in one instance as the referee of town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that description, and what do you feel, what is the role of the moderator in your opinion?
Well, Arlington has very orderly meetings. You know, there's not a lot of floor debate, but you know, so I end up thinking that it's more of a facilitator. You know, I don't really see myself as a referee, kind of between sparring citizens. You know, it's more trying to direct an orderly conversation.
And do you feel, so you're an attorney, you practice
Yes.
law in Arlington?
Actually in Manchester.
In Manchester, okay. Do you think that you need to be an attorney to be a good town moderator? How do you think
actually
that affects?
I don't. I mean, there's certain, I don't know, Roger rules of order and things like that, but it's a different skill set. You know, it's really being able to sort of guide the conversation. More, I guess, there's certain elements of that in being an attorney, but that's more mediation or something like that.
Right.
This is really, I'm just facilitating the conversation.
So you feel like any citizen that was interested in the job could probably, with the right training and attitude, tackle it?
I do. There's, the League of Cities and Towns offers a really good course, and that's been helpful in sort of understanding and getting prepared for what the various things that can come up, various surprises that can come up at the meeting. So I think it's really, just paying attention to, you know, the more and order of business and the kind of the rules of the meeting, and definitely responding to the needs of the audience or the body there that's convened. You know, there are things that people want to talk about and they have strong feelings about, and as long as we can keep the conversation polite, it works really well.
So how do you how do you have a ritual or anything you do each year? It's a long day, or can be a long evening. Arlington does them in the evening.
Arlington
correct?
does them in the evening, yeah. So we have the floor meeting where there are about 7 articles that are discussed and voted on. And then there's sort of an informational meeting at the end, and then the Australian balloting happens the next Tuesday.
So what do you do to prepare? Lots of coffee, comfortable shoes?
Well, it starts before. Usually
Right.
I start having conversations with the chair of the select board as they're putting the warning together, and kind of understanding, well, if there are any changes, if there's going to be anything different, if there's anything controversial, and we sort of have an informational meeting, and then as we get closer, I kind of do an outline, and usually spend the period of time before the meeting kind of going over that outline and making sure we're going to cover everything we need to cover. So nothing. No big rituals.
Yeah. What would you say is the toughest part of the job?
That's another really good question. I guess to a certain extent, it's being able to turn on a dime. I mean, that doesn't happen often in Arlington, but occasionally there are nothing that's usually in the warned order of business, but concerns that citizens might have that they want to bring up when other business is allowed, and you never know exactly what to expect at that point in time, and so sometimes you have to just be ready to turn on a dime and figure out what's appropriate or what's not appropriate, or things are in order or out of order.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the most challenging part.
Expect the unexpected and
Yeah.
be ready to keep it moving. Yeah. And what's the most fun part?
Actually, I think the most fun part is sort of interacting with the assembly. There are citizens that are always very vocal, and there are people who just kind of want to move things along, and there can be a little bit of humor in all of that. And so that's the kind of the part that I like, I think, is it is spontaneous. It is up there. You never really know what's going to happen. And I don't know, Arlington has a great group of residents, and it's always fun to interact with them that way.
Is there a year in particular that you remember being a sort of a grueling meeting, or something that was more challenging or difficult than another year? Or just a tough, when you got done with the meeting, thought, well, that was a tough few hours.
Well, excuse me. Arlington does their school meeting and their town meeting back to back.
Yeah.
And we kind of alternate. So one year the town goes first, and one year the school goes first. And not sure the year, but it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, Arlington was having a hard time passing their school budget. And so, we would, that meeting was long and kind of grueling, and people had a lot of valid concerns, and it was a good, lively discussion. I guess what's most memorable about it is that, when the budget got voted down, we'd have to have a series of special meetings. And so it was kind of this long, several-month debate that was kind of going on in the community.
That was spawned at town meeting day because the budget was denied. Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, but no, there haven't been very many dramatic moments.
Yeah. Has anything changed over the years? Where, you did say in a lot of ways Arlington's, the same in a lot of ways every year. Has anything changed over the years from when you started, or maybe even before you took over when your father was moderator?
Well, it's interesting. Not that there were, the topics were maybe more controversial previously, but I think it's kind of a generational thing. This kind of was at the tail end of when I was starting, but I get the feeling that in Arlington, the town meetings were a little more vocal, were a little more participatory. I remember, when my father was doing it, at times they would have, kind of a microphone stand at the front of the assembly, and people would kind of come up and make their points known, and some people had prepared notes and was go on with their stump speech or something. And that sort of changed, but and it seems to be that kind of say my grandfather's generation, because these were the people that were still participating in that way, wanted to use the floor as a forum and wanted to, that's probably more how they were used to making municipal decisions. I think that's changed a bit. I remember that kind of my father doing it, and again, there would be the microphone and people could come up and make their points. But the need sort of stopped. I mean, people weren't interested in participating that way. So now at town meeting, if somebody wants to make a point, we kind of have someone from the high school, a student, there with a microphone, and they pass it through the crowd, and people stand up and address the assembly that way. So I think that's the only real change that I've noticed.
So maybe is it a little less? Do you think having the microphone runner a little less formal than having to sort of get up and stand at a microphone? And it sounds like too that people don't feel the need to speak as much as maybe they once did.
I guess that's, yeah. I think there was a time, when this was more of a public forum where you could comment on town policy, and people were used to participating that way. So they'd have strong feelings about, the highway budget, or, what potholes needed to be filled in, or something like that. And, when that, discussion would happen, I think people felt more like this is my position, this is what I want to express. And now, I think it is a little, I don't know, I don't know, maybe it's the budgetary issues are not so dynamic, or maybe the policy is everybody sort of agrees with it.
Or happier with it, yeah.
And I think, passing the microphone around through the crowd actually encourages people to stand up and comment, because it's not so formal.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually...
You don't have to go so far from your seat to participate.
Or feel like,
right.
you have to have a prepared statement.
Right.
If you could be thinking about something and a question could come up, and you can stand up and raise your hand and ask the select board and have somebody answer it. So I actually kind of like that, that part of it.
It could be a variety of reasons. Do you think the demographics have changed and that could play a role in it? Or you think it's... like you said, more generational?
I think it's more generational.
And topics, issues are not as...
well, I don't know if the issues have changed all that much, but I think maybe the people's need to feel like you just need to speak out against something. I don't...
It's for a sociologist to figure out,
I guess so. I don't really... and I certainly don't think the demographics have changed a whole lot.
Yeah.
In the 13 years that I've been doing it, it's, obviously there are people that keep coming back and become familiar faces. But, the only thing I would note is that, there aren't a lot of really young people there. As students or young adults. Unless they're associated with, the fire department or supporting a cause or something like that they want to speak to in the budget.
Right, and they're part of another community organization, and that was one of my questions that I wanted to touch on further on, was about the participation level of young people, and it's something in general that we've noticed. And why do you think they're not participating at the same level as older folks?
I'm not really sure. I have a good answer for that. I know when school issues come up, then that generates a lot of interest among young adults who have young children. But Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I think with the town budget and the town tax rate, it's all about taxes, whether it's the school tax or whether it's the town tax. It may have to do with just who are property owners.
Right.
It may be just kind of that simple, that this is the class of people that own
And
property.
the age of people, yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're the ones who are paying the taxes, and they're the ones who have comments on how their tax dollars are being spent.
Right. Related to young people, with all the digital technology that surrounds us today, how do you think that's affected our democracy? And that's sort of a big picture question. But how do you think technology has affected the democratic process up to now? And sort of in the future, what do you think could happen with it?
Well, it's interesting, since the town meeting has been regularly broadcast, I have had, a whole lot more people come up and say, "Oh, that was really interesting." That they would never have attended the meeting before, but they were watching it, and they were, paying attention. I mean, they weren't there to vote or participate in that sense, but at least on the town meeting level, I think it's probably encouraging people to be a little bit better informed. Well, I've been surprised by people from other towns that will come up and say, "Oh, I watched your meeting," and I'm thinking, "Well, why would you be doing that?" And they wanted to know what was going on in the town next door. So.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
Town meeting voyeurism here. What's going on?
Binge watching. Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you think town meeting will exist in Vermont in 50 or 100 years from now? And if, why or why not?
Well, that immediately starts kicking in, the lawyer saying, well, gee, what it would take to change all of these processes and statutes and rules and things.
That would be a feat in itself.
Yeah. But I think, I don't know, as I said, sometimes Arlington can be, very sort of predictable. I mean, but I don't think, I think that what's most beneficial and kind of, I don't know if to call it a highlight of the meeting, but the part where there is the most participation is when the budget's being discussed and people have concerns. And I don't really see another forum for that. I guess you could participate or go to the actual select board meetings or where these budgets are being developed or things like that. But this is really a chance where the community can ask questions and say, why are we doing this, or why is this not a higher priority? And particularly, I think with the school budget, that seems to. I guess that's probably where most of the debate would happen, or where most of the questioning would happen. So I think it provides a very useful forum, and I don't know how the community would participate without it.
Right. How could that be replaced?
Exactly.
And be as effective. That's a good point.
So yeah, will it be here? I think it probably will. If nothing else, Vermont likes its sort of pure democracy that comes up, and I think that would be hard to change.
Yeah. When you decide to pass the baton to the next person, what advice would you give them about the role of the town moderator and the job and the expectations?
I think if you were, I think you'd just have to be comfortable with the role and moving the process along.
Prepare, know the issues.
Prepare, yeah, and maybe know the characters.
Right.
The people in the assembly, and yeah, I mean, and I would say, talk to some people beforehand and make sure you've got people to second motions. Sometimes in Arlington, there's a lull while we're waiting for somebody to say, okay, I second the motion. The hardest part, actually, in a way, is being prepared to explain some of the budget issues. sometimes the article is
Right.
really asking, I don't know, for the assembly to vote on 3 things, and you're really only supposed to vote on 1, and so you kind of have to be able to break it out and explain that to the assembly in a way that they can understand and follow, really.
Right, because it can get, it could get out of hand quickly. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've never really been tested with, motions and counter motions and second and third motions and having to, make sure that everything's heard in the proper sense. And I don't know, it's usually when it gets that complicated, the assembly doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
And there are times when I've definitely had to stop and say, okay, this is the procedure we're following, and kind of walk people back through it.
Reel it back in so that
Yeah.
everybody's on the same page.
Well, and it helps me stay focused.
Yeah, yeah. How do you think that we ensure an open government and an open government process and ensure that our citizens are engaged?
So I think there is a lot more opportunity for participation and people to understand what's going on. And in a way, I don't know, in a way that may be that may have an interesting effect on participation, because if you can, if you've got an issue and you can, find the minutes that educate you on the issue online, or see how the vote went at the school board and people's reasoning behind it, maybe you don't feel like you need to attend the next meeting
Right.
and start slamming on the table saying, this is my point.
Right.
There may be a greater level of comfort with that.
Yeah. So the information age in some ways has
It
really
may
made it
be.
more available.
It may be. But I know in Arlington, most everybody is accessible. If you've got something you want to talk about with a select board, you can probably find them at Stewart's in the morning, a member, or, everybody knows they're kind of all your neighbors, so you can call somebody, a member of the school board, and say, what's going on here. So there is always that kind of community participation, I think.
Yeah.
Voting is interesting. That is a little bit concerning when you see people not showing up to vote. I have very much enjoyed doing it and look forward to doing it, every year now. For a while there was some dread, but it's kind of a nice part of the rhythm of spring and getting ready for the next year.
Winter's over.
Winter's
and
over. We can
spring's here
start
and
getting ready. I mean, it's usually pretty slushy and stuff still, but
yeah.
we know mud season's right around the corner.
spring is coming if it's town
Yeah.
meeting day.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it.